Hello and welcome to today's episode of Morgan Latif Spotlight Sessions. I'm Leo Gualchierotti, one of the consultants here within the business. Earlier in the week, I had the pleasure of speaking with Oliver Bruns, the current CEO of the Gundlach Packaging Group. Outside of this, he also works in an advisory capacity at some of the world's leading leadership consulting firms and also has a very keen interest in sport. More recently, he's transitioned into the world of high rocks following a background in running. And in the episode, we talk about some of the synergies, lessons and takeaways that Oliver has taken both from his sporting but also professional journey. It's a really interesting one. I certainly took a lot of value from the discussion and hopefully you do too. Without further ado, let's jump right in. I've given a short introduction to the audience already about your background and kind of the professional context behind Oliver Bruns, but maybe for the benefit of those who aren't so familiar with yourself, Oliver, if you don't mind starting with a short introduction, give us some context of the professional journey so far, but also maybe a bit of insight into what's going on in a sporting context for yourself.
Sure. I have the great pleasure of leading an organization called the Gundlach Packaging Group. So I'm the CEO of that company. I do have a business background, but I have been working in tons of technical functions throughout my career. And basically, you could probably describe my career as, being active somewhere along the process industry, no matter if it was materials, chemicals, packaging converting, anything along those lines, and pretty much always in an international context. So I've been, living and working or studying in the US, in Asia Pacific, in Eastern Europe, and across Europe, always in very international roles. And basically, what it is, I just love working with people. You also asked about my passion about sports. So I do have a background in running and I used to be an 800-meter runner. That's pretty long time ago. And then, I've been crazy enough to go from 800 to 10K, half marathon, marathons, ultra marathons. And then over the last few years, I've been doing races across the Sahara Desert or in Jordan, or I've been running across the Rocky Mountains, or done a race called the Transalpine Run, which is what we call multi-stage races in, let's say, more difficult areas, and I really enjoy doing that. And since about 2.5, 3 years, I'm very passionate about a new sport that I know that two of us are very passionate about, which is called high rocks. And high rocks is a combination of running and fitness. And so I've been doing that on a pretty ambitious level. Had the great pleasure of participating at the World Championships, and now, as we speak, I'm in the middle of the preparation for the European Championship, which are coming up in Vienna in 2 weeks' time. So, let's keep our fingers crossed that everything is going well.
Yeah, good luck. I mean, I know it's a very busy schedule for you in the high rocks world. How did you first get into it? It's a new sport, and I think it's growing in popularity, right? Something that I learned about only in the last 6 to 12 months. But what was your entry point into the sport?
Well, I mean, I've the chance of seeing one race, and I think everyone who has been participating and just seeing and feeling the atmosphere and the energy during the High Rocks event, I mean, it's just very addictive, and so I just had to give it a try. And the fascinating thing about High Rocks is also, I mean, first of all, the community. It's lots of very cool people, and you meet tons of cool people from all over the place. But also it combines, you need to have a certain amount of power. So strength training is important. You need to be able to run and have a certain, endurance. But also something that I'm not very good at, you have a certain amount of mobility as well. So in high rocks, basically, you have multiple different people coming from different backgrounds that I meet. You have the people coming from, typical fitness, strength, almost like bodybuilding kind of types. Then you have the running people, you have the CrossFitters, people coming from all kinds of different sports and basically meeting at high rocks. And it's very difficult to predict who is doing well. So when when you describe the typical high rocks athlete, then it's probably someone who is a very well-trained athlete all over. And that's just a very fascinating sport, and there's always something to improve. I just love it, and It's probably something that is challenging, but at the same time doable for almost everyone. So it's the entry point is pretty
Yeah.
low, but then in order to really master it, and then you have to spend a lot of time, which is interesting. Yeah, I think that's just why I really like the sport.
You mentioned the physical side, the maybe more cardiovascular and mobility. I'll add a fourth. I think the mindset piece is also super important, not just in high rocks, but in kind of other sporting pursuits. Obviously, you've got a running background and it's more a mental game as well than just physical. And that's where maybe I'd like to draw on some of the synergies between sports, but also in kind of the more professional setting, things around mindset and the drivers for you. What synergies have you seen between both fields?
Oh, there are plenty of them, and I think if you just want to highlight and tackle some of them, one of the main point is focus. In professional career as well as in sports, focus is very critical. I try to avoid any kind of multitasking. I really try to avoid it. So if I'm at work and, for example, like if I'm talking to you right now, I'm talking to you with all my presence. I'm not thinking about what am I going to have for lunch or what am I doing tonight or how is the next training session coming along or whatever. So I'm trying to be fully focused on the moment. And that's something that helped me in sports as well. To be absolutely 100% focused on the moment and not to think about what should I could have done and what's happening and doing the next one. It's always focusing on the moment. That is very helpful. The next one is, I think it's to be full of passion for what we are doing. For me, if I have a busy workday and I meet a
Mm,
lot of different people and we have a lot of different subjects, I'm fully energized in the evening. I'm really full of energy because I really like what I'm doing. I like working in that context. I like the company. I like my colleagues. I just very much like it. And because I like it so much, I'm passionate about it. And when you're passionate about something, then things are not always easy. There are tough times and there are difficult situations, but you still try to master it and because you overall like the general concept of where you're active in, and that's the same with sports, right? I mean, if you're not really passionate about something, there's always going to be a day where you don't like to stand up in the morning, where you like to skip going to the gym, or you like to skip your run. There's always something that is in your mind, but if you really like it and you're dedicated and you get to a certain routine, well, then you stay focused and you make it happen. The other aspect, which I believe is critical, is the team that surrounds you. Even if you do like a sport by yourself, or even if you're like in a CEO position, where by definition you have a role which is, some people call it lonely. I don't, but I
mm.
mean, it's even if you're in that kind of roles, you can always only be as successful as the people are around you supporting you, no matter if it's your family, your friends, coaches, colleagues. I mean, it's never just an individual success that you can celebrate. It's always the achievement of a group of people, and that's something that I've recognized in sports as well as in my professional career throughout.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I suppose it's that balance between passion but also purpose and finding something that makes you want to get out of bed in the morning and do that. And one of the topics that we speak a lot about, particularly within the professional context, is burnout. Now, someone like yourself with such a busy schedule, you're also a family man, you've got children, right? How do you manage that schedule in terms of business, but also performance and sport, I suppose?
Yeah, I think for me, performance or even high performance is more like an attitude, right? I mean, it's for me, it's difficult to define that. What is really high performance? But for me, is always doing your best, whatever you can, to be competitive to a certain extent, trying to be better than your competitors, no matter if it's in sports or in business. It's always a race, no matter what you do. It's always someone trying to take your market share or taking your best people, and you try to do the opposite. And if you're at the starting line of a race in sports, it's the same thing. Everyone enjoys the overall race, but in the end, you race because you want to compete and be faster than someone else. And in the end, in business, we're also competing in a market, trying to be better than everyone else. In terms of, let's say, mental health, let me put it this way. For me, that comes along with a lot of things that I already mentioned in terms of focus. I enjoy every single second. I enjoy the moment. And I do things one after the other. I don't do things in parallel at all. So if I focus on, a discussion with someone in my team, that person gets my full attention. If for whatever reason I can't fully focus on the situation on the moment, then I will basically let the person know and say, you know what, there's still something on my mind that I can't let it go. Can we please postpone the discussion, because you deserve my full attention. If I can't give that at the moment, then I have to get something else done before. And that really helps me to stay calm and energized. So probably because I really like what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I don't really feel like a long day is a burden, and I like it. So from that perspective, that I have the great pleasure of working with people that I like, and working in an organization with a great purpose, where I believe, we do something positive for the environment and something positive for society, and that motivates me. And to see this steady progress every day a little bit better than the previous one, that keeps me very motivated.
I suppose, to play devil's advocate, someone in your position where, highly successful in both arenas, it would be easy enough for you to take a moment out and relax and rest and be comfortable with the success that you've had so far. What is it that keeps you going, and where does that motivation really stem from to continue to challenge yourself? You've mentioned a number of different runs and different disciplines that you've continually tried to compete in. Where does that drive come from?
Oh, I probably just I really like to challenge myself. That's one. I mean, it sounds maybe a bit strange, but I like to win.
Okay.
I like to win against whatever I'm trying to win against. And I really like to achieve my targets at work. And if I don't, then I take my team and say, hey guys, what can we do in order to outperform next time? So I think I like being in a winning environment. And that's one. I like to challenge myself. Only if I challenge myself, I progress as a person. There's always something to learn, always something that I feel could have done better. So from that perspective, this is a very strong drive towards continuous improvement, in physical exercise, mental stability, being a better leader for my teams. This is why I'm reading a lot, why I'm listening a lot to people coming from various different industries, disciplines, functions, and so on, and trying to pick up on how they're doing it and what makes them successful. But for me, dedication, passion, focus is something that I've seen along the lines. There is another commonality. Typical, most successful people in business that I've seen so far, and successful people in sports that I've seen, they were more or less, in many times, rather humble people, having a great set of values, treating other people well. This is an underlying theme that I've seen across the lines. Whenever I've seen someone who's not really treating other people right, who is just, with a huge ego and not really focused on overall team, then typically over time that shows that this person is not going to be successful on a sustainable level. So that is something that I've learned over many years, and have been able to learn from fantastic people so far.
And it comes back to that group and team setting, right? You can't do it by yourself. I know that you've done a lot of work on culture and values. Talk to me about why that's such an important topic for you.
Well, in the end, your team and the culture, which is the way you work as a team, is the only competitive advantage you can have long term, right? Everything else that we do could be copied. The buildings, someone else could build the same buildings. Someone else could, purchase the same machines or, purchase the same raw materials. And in the end, almost everything we do could be copied. But our team is unique. And the way we work is unique. And that cannot be copied. That cannot be just purchased for any money that is available. That's our competitive advantage. So when someone is asking me, so hey, Oliver, what is your USP as a company, or why is your team so successful? It's because of the team. We have great technologies because we have a great team. We have a very efficient setup, let's say in manufacturing as well as in administration, because we have a great team. So the actual USP is my team and how the team interacts with each other. If you have someone having, let's say, an office job, you can look out of the window and count the birds all day long, or do something that really creates a lot of value for the company. Most people get the same amount of money, right? The only difference is, do you really identify yourself and are you motivated to create some value, or are you not? So this is why I'm so focused on corporate culture, on the way we work as a team and getting the right people into the team. Because in the end, that's the main competition that we have. So we are not necessarily directly competing with someone, let's say, for Gundlach, competing in the packaging space. We're actually competing with all the organization who attracts great talent. And that's my main job as CEO, always trying to create an atmosphere to get the best and most talented people in our team. Right. And in that sense, I'm not just competing with my, let's say, typical competitors, which are producing the same product or rendering the same service and providing the same service. It's in the end, it's for every organization that I'm competing with. And that's a fierce competition.
Hmm.
So if I want to basically describe my job as a CEO, then obviously I'm a little bit of a headhunter, right? Constantly looking and searching for the best talent out there. And then, I'm probably to a large extent the corporate culture manager, because in the end, I have fantastic people working in our team. I don't have to tell them exactly how they do their job. They know how to do their job much better than I do. But I can ask, what can I do for you in order to be, to feel even better? What can I do for you to make your job easier? What is missing in order for you to be even more successful? So it's me working for them, not them working for me. And I think that mindset that has helped me a lot.
You referenced finding individuals who have a focus on creating value, right, in the business context. How do you make sure that there's a focus on this common goal and set a clear vision and direction for the people within the business?
Um, I think it's for me. I try to work with pictures, right? We all need to have a picture in front of us. Sometimes that might be a number, but I'm not so much on a, let's say, strategic long-term motivational area. It's not about, let's say, achieving that number. It's about what kind of impact can we have on society? What kind of impact can we have on our families, on companies working with us? What can we do for the environment? What can we do in order to create a world which is a little bit better because we exist? And if we have that common understanding on what is the purpose that we as an organization exist, that is very powerful. That is very, very powerful. Um, and if you have a team who aligns with that purpose, with that general direction that we want to take, from that moment onwards, it's pretty easy, because then it's just a question on how do we get there? How do we constantly improve in order to be, creating more value, to be better for society and so on. And then we can have very heated discussions left and right on what's the right way to get there. but we don't discuss the direction we want to take. The direction, we have all signed up on that. This is what we want to achieve, and this is why we want to achieve. And now let's have a constant, very good discussion. How do we achieve it? And the how can be flexible. Sometimes, market situations change, or the competitive environment is changing, or our team is changing, and that means we have to adapt the how we get there. But the overall picture and direction that we want to take, that is something which is critical for me, because I would make the bold statement that you can probably ask every single person in my organization, even middle of the night, you wake them up and say, hey, why do we exist as a company? I would probably bet that you get a pretty good answer out of everyone.
That's a good focus to have, right? And a good kind of way of looking at business. I think it can often be so focused on the bigger picture, but maybe lose that focus on the people side, which, as a headhunter is an important part of my role. And yeah, super interesting. I suppose both in the context of the packaging industry, where it's been a tough market, but also, linking it back to the topic of sport as well. Things don't always go your way, and there are certain points which you can't control. What is your perspective on losing? Or, I don't like to use the word failure, but what is your perspective when things don't go as you had initially planned?
Let me put it first. I mean, there's always something that comes along your way. There's always a challenge in front of you. There is always something happening that you didn't see coming. So for me, the first attitude is don't give up. And I mean, don't give up if it's getting tough, no matter if it's during a high rocks race, or you run across the desert, or if you're in business. Just because things get tough doesn't mean that you give up on your targets, right? Be creative, change the plan, do something about it, right? Everyone was so busy talking about the market is being down last year. I mean, almost every person I talked to said, well, it's a tough year, it's so difficult, and market is down. Yes, it was a difficult market. We grew significantly last year. We had a significant increase in profitability, in turnover, in volume, in any KPI you can think of. Well, because we accepted and said, okay, that's the way it is. And now let's go, right? I mean, it's do you accept a situation, or you just constantly arguing towards yourself why you can't be successful because something is getting difficult, right? So from this perspective, something getting difficult means it's just another challenge in front of us. So let's try to find a way to tackle the challenge. Now, at the same time, as you have rightly mentioned, there's always something that you might not win, you might not succeed the way you want it. That's fine, but important for me is that we take our learnings out of it. We've tried our best. It's perfectly fine if someone else has done a better job, is in better shape, and as long as I have the feeling we have done whatever we could in order to be successful, fine. And at the same time, no matter if we achieve our targets or not, if we have been successful or we might not have been as successful as we have been hoping for, well, let's reflect on it. What have we done well? What could have been done better? What are the things that we see someone else has done in order to outperform us, maybe? So we always take our learnings, we reflect, we continuously improve. So it's this continuous involvement. And then if we are successful, we celebrate, and then we take the next challenge ahead of us, and we move on. So if we have a good month, we go out and we celebrate. If we have a bad month, we come together and we make a new plan. So how do we fight back? That's the kind of attitude we want to have, right? Celebrating a success, but at the same time, the moment celebration is over, setting the next target, continuous improvement, learning, being focused, being passionate about what we're doing, surrounding yourself with people with a positive mindset. For me, positive mindset in general is something very important. And I think this is exactly what we're seeing right now in the market. A lot of people have, from my perspective, lost this positive mindset. Yes, it's difficult. Yes, we are living in a very crazy world at a crazy time. But if we lose being optimistic, if we lose our positive mindset, well, then it's almost for sure the direction we're going to take. So from that perspective, try to keep our smile, stay positive, and keep on pushing.
In your view, is that something that can be coached? The positive attitude towards certain projects? I suppose it's the nature v nurture argument that some people are born with that level of grit, drive, and focus on continuous improvement. Others maybe just don't have that. What's your take on that point?
Yeah, I think to a large extent that can be coached, right? Because if you are in an environment of people with a very positive mindset, it's much easier to adopt. The same way, if you're just constantly surrounded by people with a very negative mindset, then it might take a lot of energy to be the only positive one in that group of people. So yes, to some extent, I think it can be coached. But also, I don't want to neglect it. To some extent, it's probably a bit, let's say, personality. Some people are just by nature a little bit more positive than others. And this has, by the way, this has nothing to do with risk averse or not risk averse. Some people say, if people are a little bit more careful, risk averse, that this means they're not as positive. I would disagree. A positive mindset does not mean you're always taking risks, and that's a totally different different criteria of behavior. Some people are more positive than others, but I think it's the job of functions like myself, of CEOs and other leaders, to make sure you create an environment where it's allowed, where it's encouraged to be positive.
We're recording this podcast at a really interesting time. I think, early February is often the point at which New Year's resolutions can be thrown out of the window. People come into the January period having all these dreams and goals for the year, but often are abandoned at this stage. Do you have any particular habits or pillars in your own mindset and approach to goal setting, which you've seen really to be quite successful in making sure that not only do you start the goals, but also the input is there to ensure the success and outcome of those ultimate projects that you might be on?
Yes. And now maybe the way I describe it is maybe a little bit more technical or even process driven, but yes. So what I'm doing, and no matter if it's in business or in sports, but let me take a business explanation. So what we do is we have a bit of a longer term vision. Let's say we have a picture in front of us how we want to be as a company in 2030 or 2035. And we all agree on this is the general direction that we want to take. Now, what we do, we break that down and create a strategy and say this is the way we want to achieve that. The strategy is being broken down in what we call strategic initiatives, specific initiatives that help us achieving that target, that goal. Now, every single activity and project we are running in as an organization has to be linked one-to-one to one of the strategic initiatives, always. So we don't work with OKRs, we don't work with annual budgets of great significance. We track on a weekly basis on where we are with all our activities and projects that help us in these strategic initiatives to achieve our targets. That's what we do. So whenever we do something, when someone wants to start a new project, the first question is, which strategic initiative is this supporting? If the answer is, well, none of them really, and we say, well, then most likely we shouldn't be doing it, right? Because we focus. Or if we really strongly believe that this is absolutely critical and should be done, then we need to have a strategic discussion because we might be missing something in our strategy, right? So we don't do anything. So on a weekly base, we have a connection to our, let's say, 2030 or 2035 picture directly. So this is why in my organizations, everyone knows what our strategy is all about and which target we want to achieve, because every single project, every single activity has to serve one strategic initiative, and the sum of the strategic initiatives makes up our overall direction on achieving our overall goal. And that could be done now in sports, that could be done in business, that could be done in anything, right? So let's say if you say in 2028 I want to participate at the HYROX World Champions, then you can work backwards and say my strategic initiatives, I need to improve my running because I need to make sure I run 10K below 35 minutes. And one strategic initiative is I need to increase my power, muscle volume, whatever, because I need to be better in sled push and so on. And then you break it down. Well, this my weekly program, my agenda, whatever I have in my calendar, does this support my strategic initiatives? And the strategic initiative overall makes up your goal, for example, going to the World Championships or reaching a billion turnover of an organization or whatever that is, right? So I'm not really a big fan of creating a strategy and putting it somewhere in a drawer and not looking at it. And I'm also not a big fan of having an annual target and then looking at the end of the year, did I achieve my target? And then you have a yes or no, but well, then a year is gone. So this is why basically we check in on a weekly basis. Every Friday afternoon, all leaders in my organization receive an email automatically from the system, and it shows all strategic initiatives, all activities and projects below these initiatives, and are they on track or are they not on track? And they're on track and not on track means quality, time, and budget. And there is no yellow. There is no yeah, maybe. No, it's on track or it's not on track. And if it's not on track, then the maximum of amount of time we have lost is a week. Maximum. But we immediately get ourselves together and say, okay, how do we get this one specifically back on track on a specific level? And because we do that on activity and project level, we make sure our strategic initiatives are never really at risk because we constantly make sure it's undermined. It's built on a foundation of all these projects and initiatives. That's how we work.
It's super interesting. I think Musk has a kind of mantra. Is this going to get us closer to Mars or Bezos? There was kind of a decision-making process of, does this ultimately improve the customer experience for Amazon? And it's kind of that North Star, I suppose, but it's the review, it's the tactical side of that, which makes the strategic side more achievable and often is forgotten, and hence why I brought up the example of New Year's resolutions, which I think myself included, a lot of us are guilty of perhaps letting slip by the wayside after a certain period of time, particularly if you do get behind on goals and you need to course correct and adapt in certain areas. For example, on your weekly review, if you're not on track with something, those tweaks are super important, right?
Absolutely. And there's another thing that works quite well for me. I never regret on anything that I haven't been doing, but I'm learning out of it. Right? Let's say I have a cold and I have to stop my physical exercise, my training for a week. Right? It's a waste of time to go look back and say, oh, what would have happened if I wouldn't have received that, I wouldn't have got that cold, I could have been in a totally different shape and all this stuff. Well, get over it. It's done. That's what happened. You took a deliberate decision to stop practicing for a week because you get a cold. Now work harder the week afterwards in order to make up for it. Fine, right? But don't, let's, I think a lot of, what helped me is I stopped complaining. Oh, last week didn't work because, or, markets are tough, or it's raining outside, or it's too hot, it's too cold, its competition is too bad, it's because suppliers are not performing. Just stop complaining and just go for it, right? If we take all this energy that we are as society spending on complaining and, sorry for the word, but bullshitting around stuff that has been happening or that we can't directly influence, and focus on moving forward with a positive mindset and accepting it as a challenge and creating something that brings us forward more closer to our targets, I think we would be in a much better state.
I'll make a note of that. I'm sure my girlfriend will appreciate the advice. I'm told I can complain a little bit here and there, but it's easier said than done, though, right? And I suppose it's It's interesting how you can bring that into your life. It comes back to this kind of mindset piece, gratitude, I suppose, for what is going right, and having more of a focus on the future and the controllables as opposed to what's been and done, and what maybe you have less influence over. So it's for sure a super interesting lesson. What for you, Oliver? I think my final question for the session today, I'm really curious, is there one particular lesson or insight from your sporting endeavors that you feel has really helped you in the success from a business context as a leader across your multiple roles in the industry? What is the defining lesson that you feel you've taken from that?
It's probably I have to think about what's the one, right? I think the team aspect is definitely one. Energy and focus is definitely one. Maybe one that I haven't talked about so far, which is the process optimization, right? I mean, for me, it's always a combination of team, culture, and process. And process is something that helped me in sports as well as my professional career. I try to cut out any kind of waste. Anything that doesn't help, cut it out. Again, complaining doesn't help. It's a waste. From a lean perspective, it's waste. It's a loss of energy. Cut it out. And I take very deliberate decisions. So even when I take a decision, I'm watching a movie for 2 hours, then I took a deliberate decision to do that. And I'm not regretting it. I'm not looking back and said, oh, I should have done this. I could have done that. No, I took a deliberate decision. I focused on that moment. With all my attention, I watched that movie or I went for a walk or whatever it is. So mindset and focus played a big role, but also, again, the process optimization. Not wasting energy and time, not during practice of doing something which is just not helping me, and not in business spending resources and energy and attention on something that is not getting us closer to our target. So I think that is something we can mention as well.
Super interesting. I suppose now more than ever, it's so easy. There's so many distractions to not be present, to not focus on that single thing and try to multitask. So, Oliver, it's been a real pleasure. I've taken a lot of value from the discussion and really appreciate your time. Wishing you the best in Vienna at the upcoming event, and no doubt we'll be in touch anyway.
Slowly. Thanks a lot. Has been a great discussion. All the best.
Thanks a lot.